In the last hours, we are hearing reports that the two surviving roommates, Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Frank, were actually awake and texting each other during the murders of their roommates.
Well, hello there, how is everyone? I hope you're all well on this fabulous Friday. That's right, baby, it's Friday. We made it. How quick are these weeks going? I don't know whether it's a good thing because we're heading towards Christmas and we all love Christmas, or we should be concerned because we're watching our lives trickle away quickly. But anyway, you're looking amazing, despite this hectic week that we've had. Yeah, you're looking amazing. How do you do it? Anyway, what you just listened to there was Nancy Grace. And she was talking about someone by the name of Bethany Frank. Bethany Frank. So she goes on to make it look like she's an advocate for these people, you know. She is an absolute advocate. She has been watching this case. She has been watching it, and she has been taking this in fully. She has been doing all of the research of everything. She has been watching every single video. She has been reading every single document. She has been all over this like white on rice. But she doesn't know her name. That in itself, you could turn around and say, look, if you, Nancy Grace, if you want to sit there and talk for these people and make out like you've done all your research, you've done all your homework, you should at least get the person's name right, especially when you're talking about the people who are at ground zero. I know we throw some shade over Dylan Mortensen and Bethany Frank, but we do so in the hunt for justice. We do so in the hunt for justice because ultimately this case has questions. It's got questions floating around it, and the actions and inactions of people around it can sometimes paint a picture. It can paint whether these people knew something, whether they saw something, heard something, whether they were in on it. You hate to think it, but history has told us that sometimes life will throw you a curveball. Something will happen. There'll be a case where you don't think someone's involved. You look at cases like Chris Watts, for instance, do you know what I mean? I know some people say, well, he looked dodgy from the start and I had him pinned at the start, but there will be people who are absolutely shocked by that. And there has been cases where you absolutely think you know who done the crime, and then all of a sudden they will get found not guilty. And then you think to yourself, well, if they're not guilty, then who did it then? And it could happen in this case. Brian Kohberger very well could be found innocent. He could be found guilty, of course he could. There is evidence pointing towards him that don't look great, and he's going to, like I say, that's going to have to come out and go through the system if it gets that far, and a decision will have to be made. But he could be found innocent of this crime. There could be a piece of information that comes out that proves that he couldn't have done it. We have spoken briefly in the past about the Burler report. Now, his car should have information stored within it that could help to corroborate his story. Now, Nancy Grace wants to push that this driving around at night is something that is out of the ordinary, bizarre, and it's not helping at all, and it's the weakest alibi that has ever been told by anybody. Why is it? Why is it? Is it because you feel that Brian Kohberger is the only person in the world who drives around at night? Or that if you drive around at night, you are automatically a killer? Let me know down below. If you drive around at night, don't worry, we're not going to try and pin you to unsolved crimes in your area. But they said it's very, very convenient for him to be able to say he drives around at night. And I would say, well, it's not really convenient, is it? It's quite inconvenient because he's facing the death penalty and he doesn't have an alibi that has a witness. And it just so happens that things that many, many people do that he could have indeed been doing may have been the very, very thing that got him placed in this position in the first place. If he had a conversation with law enforcement, and we have alluded to this before, and that is if he has a conversation with law enforcement, they ask him what he was doing at a certain time on a certain night, and he turns around and he's honest with them and says, I was driving around, I drive around at night. Do you have any witnesses? No, I don't. I frequently drive around on my own at night to clear my head, get some space, it's just, all right. So you was driving around sort of Moscow, Idaho or whatever, and you have no witnesses. Around what sort of time would you say that was? And before you know it, you're fucked. So look, it could be that this wasn't anything but a true story that was the catalyst for him being where he is today. And maybe that is exactly why law enforcement and the system was pushing for his alibi, because they knew he didn't have one, because they'd already done the interview that would be the very interview that would put him in the place that he's in now, because they knew he'd never be able to argue his way out of it. But Nancy Disgrace, sorry, Freudian slip. If you are going to talk about these people in the manner with which you are, the best thing to do is learn their name, because as soon as you don't know their name, you lose all credibility. You come across as disingenuous, because you don't even have the decency to learn someone's name, but then you speak about them. She talks about the fact that Dylan and Bethany were said to have been texting one another. And she goes on to say, I can't see that. I don't believe it. Don't believe it. Don't believe it at all. I can't see it. Why don't you see it? What do you know about these two individuals that would lead you to believe that they wouldn't have been texting each other during this crime? You don't know them personally. You don't even have the decency to learn their name. And what you do is you look at an article and you say, right, so in this article it says that Dylan and Bethany were messaging each other around the time of this crime. And I don't believe that bit, so we're going to take that out. That's not true. But this article says that Brian Kohberger bought a K-bar knife and sheath. And you believe that. You believe that bit 100%. Because this piece suits your narrative and that one doesn't. And again, this is another person, legacy media, mainstream media, digital media, pushing a specific narrative on a crime. And what makes me laugh is you'll listen to what she's saying and she doesn't even get these people's names right. And I know I go on and on and on. But then you'll see people in the comments and these people are, oh, you're so wonderful. This is proper journalism. Keep on it. Proper journalism. She didn't get a friggin' name right. And then she's talking about what she's talking about and pulling this article apart and handpicking what she's willing to accept as true and what she won't accept as true. And then you've got people like JLR, and look, JLR does some fantastic work, but then you've got JLR doing a video as well talking about Idaho are executing someone in Idaho, and that should make Brian Kohberger worry. Why should it make Brian Kohberger worry that someone who was arrested back in 1974 is finally being given the death penalty? All that's going to show Brian, at the very least, is if he's guilty and he does get sentenced to death, he's probably got a good another 30, 40 years in him. Anyway, I digress. But this is the problem. This is the entire problem with this case. You've got people who will deep dive and they'll look at stuff and they'll talk about everything. And then you've got people like Nancy Grace who are highly respected people, which she is. She can't get away from it. She's highly respected. And she will say what she has to say and has her thoughts and opinions on certain things, but they aren't seen as thoughts and opinions. People will attack channels like mine. They'll attack channels like Grizzly, for instance. They'll attack all of the channels that talk about these crimes as if we shouldn't have an opinion, But yet Nancy Grace, all she's having is an opinion. And she can't even get people's names right, but that's seen as okay. And the bigger picture is the vast majority of people don't have empathy towards one another. Like Dylan and Bethany, for instance, to say that they 100% weren't texting each other during this crime is ludicrous, and you likely don't have children yourself, because that generation, I'm telling you, they don't have empathy for one another. They're so self-centered, and I'm not saying all of them. I'm saying the generation contains many, many, many youngsters who just don't have empathy for one another. They don't. They just don't. They simply don't care. And I'm coming from a perspective of having children who are raised well. You know, they don't have a bad background. They're not. You know, and they don't have empathy for one another as sisters. And that's just me being honest. Just being honest. But look, Brian Koberger, he's facing the death penalty. And you've got people like Nancy Grace who are controlling the online media narrative and pushing certain things and specifics. But they can't, like I say, and I just want to push this home to try and get this to settle in people's minds. Because this is where you've got to choose who you truly want to trust and truly want to listen to. Is it people who may say things that you don't agree with, but they at least have the decency of getting the people's names right? They go over everything with a fine-tooth comb, and they look at every single angle to bring out everything so you can have it all and make your own decision. Or do you want to speak to people who don't have the decency to learn these people's names, and they just want to handpick things and give it to you and say, that's the news. That's the news. Talking about Amazon and how that your clicks reflect your thoughts and feelings, which to a degree, yeah, I can see that, but I don't see why you want to dramatise that principle in this case, because ultimately, what are they talking about? They're talking about the fact that Brian Koberger could have been going on Instagram and looking at females. And again, I say that just because someone looks at someone online, looks at a picture, looks at a profile, likes a girl clad in a bikini, it doesn't mean they're going to go on to murder her. You know, just because someone buys duct tape and cable ties, it doesn't mean they're a murderer. Obviously, I suppose what they're saying is in murder cases and things like that, if they look at their digital footprint and they see that they're buying these things or they're doing these things, then that can paint a picture. But let's also not forget that Brian's area of expertise, if you liked, part of that was his digital knowledge, what he learned about crimes and online and being, you know, DNA and digital footprints, so on and so forth. So wouldn't it be fair to say that if Brian Koberger was the smart guy that he could have potentially been, he would have covered his tracks with things like that? But anyway, I digress. Let me know what you think. Do people like Nancy Grace have a right to come out and steer the narrative the way that they do? And do people need to be more sort of vigilant on who they listen to and actually pay attention? Because it would seem that some people just simply don't pay attention. They listen to what someone's saying, but they're so fixated on whether that person is going to say something that supports what their internal narrative is, what they believe, that they miss the bits that they get wrong. So many bits that they do get wrong. You know, it has not been proven anywhere that Brian Koberger 100% has gone out and bought a weapon that was involved in this crime. The car has not been proven. Well, we have not seen proof that it is his car. We have his defense team stating that he was not in the area at the time of the crime. He was driving around. They've said that, but they have stated very specifically that he was not in the area at the time of the crime. Let that settle with you. We are going to touch on something in video 2 later, as we do have to be fair, and we do have to touch on the fact that could the prosecution and defence be playing games to, to support what their end goal is? And more specifically, could the defence simply be playing with both the public and the system, because they simply don't have anything to lose? Let me know down below how you feel about Dylan Morganton and Bethany Frank. Catch you all in the next one.